Throughout history, the consumption of meat has been a necessary part of the human diet. However, what once was a method of hunting and sustainability slowly progressed into mass production. Beginning in the 20s with the poultry industry and later in the 70s with the beef and pork industry, factory farming became the lead mode of meat production. Like many other industries in society, the main aim was maximizing profits, which resulted in little care for animal welfare. This has carried suit into today as the need for meat has increased along with the world's population. However, as the meat industry continues to mass produce, the damaging effects on our planet start stacking up. To simply produce 1 kilo of beef, it requires the cow to be fed 25 kilos of grain and 15,000 litres of water, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, as it's estimated that there will not be enough water available to produce food for the expected 9 billion population in 2050 if we follow current trends as suggested by Malin Falkenmark, indicating that our planet could see disastrous food and water shortages globally unless changes begin to be made. So if the meat industry is so damaging, leaving effects that will begin to occur in most of our lifetimes, why is this not publicly displayed in mainstream media? Well, that has been the aim of my research as I determine why the media's portrayal of animals differ from livestock to other species and how this affects society's meat consumption. To gain an understanding of how mainstream media portrays livestock differently to other animals, I conducted a study that stems from the ideas discussed in Peter Singer's Animal Liberation, where the coverage of non-human animals is dominated by human interest events like baby gorilla's birth at a zoo or threats to endangered species, but developments in farming techniques that deprive millions of animals of freedom of movement go unreported. To do this, I held a 2-week-long observation of Sydney Morning Herald and news.com.au from the 10th to the 23rd of May. During this time, I took note of every article in relation to animals and what stories were covered. The results were no surprise, with news.com.au having 16 articles on animals and none relating to livestock, and Sydney Morning Herald had 6 relating to animals and only 1 relating to livestock. Aside from this, the remaining articles were entirely based towards human interest and were empathetic towards other animals, such as a whale calf getting stuck in the River Thames in London, rescuing ducklings from a storm drain, and a lonely macaw looking for love, as the headline reads, just to name a few. Despite the fact that millions of livestock are slaughtered and kept in inhumane conditions, this is rarely shown. Instead, it is the problems with other animals that are covered, which leaves us with the question of why. Well, there are a number of reasons for this. One discussed in Carrie Freeman's 2009 journal article that states how mainstream media often places humans at the pinnacle of moral concern and constructs farmed animals as naturally existing only for humans' use as necessary food resource. The effect this has allows humans to disassociate or avoid debates related to the meat industry and believe the issue does not affect them or that there is no issue at all. From a survey I conducted with students from the University of Wollongong, I found that 50% of participants would avoid arguments over if meat should be eaten and 36% would possibly avoid it. And even more shockingly, over 90% of participants agreed they would disassociate and try to avoid thinking about the living conditions of the animals they are eating. This suggests that people may avoid knowing the truth in order to continue to eat as they please, which is backed up by an idea discussed in Robert Chalet's 2016 journal article, which states that consumers resistant to abandon their everyday habits and the cultural imperative of meat consumption routinely avoid and disassociate themselves from meat-related controversies. But from the survey that I conducted, I found that 70% of participants would possibly change their eating habits if confronted with images and videos of how livestock are treated, and 80% agreed that the media does not cover the inhumane treatment of livestock and damages to our planet enough. So although people try and disassociate themselves from the inhumane treatment of livestock, there is also a lacking discussion in mainstream media that would ultimately begin to make people more aware. However, mainstream media often overlooks the inhumane treatment and damaging effects to the planet in order to appease the economy, as the structure of the economy as a whole constrains and coerces consumer behavior, and a reduction in the consumption of meat would have negative effects on the consumer market. Although the meat industry is clearly leading an unsustainable future and contributing to large amounts of animal cruelty, these issues are often disregarded. Instead, the media puts emphasis on retail companies that are doing well. Emily Buttle and Heather Bray discuss this further in their 2019 journal article, as they found that retailers and large food companies position themselves as champions of consumer concern by promoting their animal-friendly products such as free-range eggs, So-Stall-free pork, and RSPCA-approved chicken, etc. However, it is these large companies that continue to allow for mass meat production that contributes to climate change and inhumane animal treatment, even if some of their meat is sourced ethically. From the survey conducted, I found that a large majority of participants were unaware of statistics relating to the effects of the meat industry on the planet, which further suggests that mainstream media will only show you so much, as not to negatively affect the consumer market and the meat industry. As a result, the necessary change is left in the hands of the unaware public, and it is up to us to make a change. Although scientists are working on meat alternatives such as cultured meat, which utilizes technology to produce meat from animal cells without killing the animal, this will also need to be perpetuated by the media, as consumers often look to the media for information concerning food issues. Therefore, it is necessary for leaders in the meat industry to be aware of the media coverage surrounding cultured meat. And even with this, experts still doubt that innovative technologies and more efficient production methods alone will solve the environmental and social questions of the livestock industry and global food security. So ultimately, the change needs to begin now. While turning to a meat-free diet may seem daunting, simply reducing one's meat intake can have positive effects. A study from the Australian Conservation Foundation found that reducing red meat intake by 150 grams serving a week, an individual would save 300 kilos of greenhouse gas pollution in a year. While the media failed to show the true effects of the meat industry, this issue still prevails. But by outsourcing our news and reducing our meat intake, we can begin to be the change.